So, Canada, the second largest country in the world. Sounds like a dream, right? But what if I told you that it's not all that it seems? If hearing this makes you feel uneasy, well, it should. Because Canada is currently going through a pretty rough time, and honestly, I'm not sure things will get better anytime soon. Over the past few years, something crazy has been happening. Seems like a lot of people are leaving the country. Now, moving to Canada could turn your life into a nightmare. Thousands of people are packing up and leaving because they just don't see a future here. Inflation has broken a 40-year record, and in July alone, around 7,000 people lost their jobs. Streets are filled with open drug use, and the crime rate is the highest it's been in the last 30 years, especially in the past 2 years. Renting or buying a home in Canada has become nearly impossible for about 70% of the population. In the last decade, homelessness has almost doubled. A country that was once the second best in the world, with people lining up to immigrate, is now in shambles. Let's talk geography for a second. Canada is the second largest country in the world by area, located just above the U.S. To the west, it borders the Pacific Ocean, to the east, the Atlantic Ocean, and to the north, the Arctic Ocean. The Canada-U.S. border is the longest in the world, and interestingly, 80% of Canada's population lives within 100 miles of this border. In fact, half of all Canadians live even closer. Ontario, a single province, contributes around 40% to Canada's GDP. Population distribution is heavily influenced by Canada's harsh winters, especially in the northern regions where it's either ice or endless lakes and rivers. About 50% of the world's freshwater lakes are in Canada. Canada is rich in natural resources, boasting the world's fourth largest oil reserves, as well as large deposits of potassium, coal, geothermal energy, and natural gas. Because of its abundant lakes and water reserves, 60% of Canada's energy comes from hydrothermal plants, making it the second largest producer of hydropower in the world. Despite these incredible resources, Canada's situation has been declining rapidly in recent years. In 2021, only 45% of immigrants became Canadian nationals after 10 years of living here. Compare that to 2001, when 75% of immigrants took citizenship. This means a lot of people coming to Canada now don't see it as a long-term home. According to a recent survey, 20% of immigrants who arrived after 2018 thinking about leaving. This is alarming because when immigrants start leaving or aren't interested in becoming citizens, it's a dangerous sign for any country. The number one reason behind this crisis? Cost of living. Just look at how housing prices have changed over the last decade. Since 2008, housing prices have almost doubled. A well-known Canadian blogger pointed out that in Waterloo, a one-bedroom, one-bathroom apartment that cost $900 per month in 2017 now rents for $2,200 in 2023. That's a 120% increase in just 6 years. The mortgage for a house that was $1,000 per month in 2015 is now around $5,000 per month. In big cities like Toronto, Vancouver, or Waterloo, where most people live, renting a small one-bedroom apartment costs around $2,000 a month. And if you want to buy a home, the mortgage could be as high as $5,000 per month. Considering that the average monthly salary in Canada is between $4,000 to $6,000 before taxes, and then factoring in high taxes, food, and travel expenses, how can anyone afford such high rent or mortgage payments? Even that $6,000 per month salary is for higher-end white-collar jobs. The average annual salary in Canada is $60,000, or about $5,000 per month. This is why a recent survey found that 63% of Canadians do not own a home and have given up on the idea of ever owning one. If your annual salary is $60,000, after taxes, it's about $50,000. If you live in major cities like Toronto, Vancouver, or Waterloo, your annual rent alone could be between $20,000 to $25,000. Add to that the cost of food, which is at least $5,000, plus car insurance, medical insurance, and occasional shopping, especially for winter clothes because Canada's winters are brutal. By the end of the year, you're left with barely anything to save for a home. It could take you 10 to 15 years just to save enough to buy an average house. The second reason people are struggling to live in Canada is the slow job market. Canada is heavily dependent on natural resources, so most investments go into mining, manufacturing, and real estate. About 17% of Canada's GDP comes from natural resources, and 7% of its merchandise exports are these same resources. This housing bubble has a major downside. All the money goes into real estate rather than industries, because investors prefer to invest in real estate, where prices are skyrocketing, rather than in businesses. With industries struggling, job creation is minimal. Canada's two largest export industries, oil and car manufacturing, are both in decline. Most of Canada's oil comes from Alberta, and about 70% of it goes to the U.S. However, extracting and mining this oil is expensive for the U.S., so they're now tapping into their own reserves, which is cheaper. As a result, the demand for Canadian oil is dropping, leading to revenue declines for oil companies, which in turn are laying off workers. Similarly, Canada's car manufacturing industry has been in steady decline since the 2008 recession. In 1999, Canada produced 3 million cars, but by 2020, production had dropped to 1.4 million. The main reason for this is that car companies are moving to Mexico, where labor costs are much lower. The group hit hardest by these changes? Students, especially those from India and Pakistan, who come here hoping to earn money with part-time jobs while studying, and eventually secure permanent residence. But the situation has changed drastically. Most part-time jobs are now filled up, especially labor jobs in warehouses or cleaning. Even skilled jobs in IT, engineering, or finance are highly competitive. Canada took a huge hit during COVID-19, leading to many business closures. Then, just a year later, the Russia-Ukraine war began, causing a global recession. During all this, millions of immigrants and students, especially from Asia, flocked to Canada to build careers. Now, the situation is that there's an oversupply of people and not enough jobs. The third reason Canada is becoming less desirable is the rising violence. Since 2020, there's been a significant increase in armed robberies and murders. According to many Canadian news agencies, violent crimes like these have never been seen in Canada before. What's even more dangerous is the rise of unprovoked random attacks. Since COVID, unprovoked attacks on ordinary citizens have become quite common. You could be walking down the street and suddenly get stabbed, shoved, or punched by someone. In 2021 alone, there were about 1,700 such attacks in Vancouver. Crime experts believe the major cause of these attacks is mental illness. Unemployment, inflation, and harsh tax laws have mentally affected many people, leading to these acts of frustration. Unfortunately, most of the victims of these attacks were Asians, which suggests that racism might also be a factor. Overall, if you ask anyone who has been living in Canada for many years, they will confirm that violence and crime rates have risen significantly in recent time. Finally, the thing that has damaged Canada's reputation the most is the healthcare system. Canadians used to take great pride in their healthcare system, but it's now in serious trouble, especially after COVID. Many Canadian bloggers have raised this issue, saying that before 2019, you could visit a clinic anytime and get a doctor's appointment the same day. But now, people have to wait weeks, even months, to see a doctor. Currently, the average wait time in Canada is 22 to 27 weeks. That means if you have any illness, your turn in the National Health Service will come in about 4 months. Yes, if you have a serious condition, you'll need to go to the emergency room, but even there, admission is prioritized. For example, heart attack or accident patients are given priority, while others are put on hold. Cancer screenings are also given lower priority, which increases the risk of late diagnosis. So, all in all, Canada isn't the Canada we've heard about. Things have changed, and unfortunately, in Canada's case, they've changed for the worse. Whether this is all the fault of Justin Trudeau's government or not is a matter of opinion. But one thing is certain. The Canadian Prime Minister's approval rating is at its lowest, and he's going to face a tough time in the 2025 election. Even among Asians, you'll find mixed opinions. Many Asians are unhappy with the rising costs in Canada, especially those who haven't landed white-collar jobs. Canada still has a lot to offer if you're a skilled professional, but if you're just starting out or trying to build a life from scratch, the reality might not match the dream you once had.